What's going on, guys? K-Pine here and welcome back. And in this video I'll be featuring a double dark team in the Open Ultra League. Charizard on the lead, Umbreon on the safe swap, and Obstagoon in the back. This team is centered around the idea that Charizard's going to be your hard hitter or even sweeper, with it being accompanied by two tanks in the back. And speaking of those tanks, Umbreon is an absolute unit and can take hits for days. And its sole purpose on this team, other than completely walling Jellicent, is to lure out those fighters or fairy types that Obstagoon doesn't want to see. And with that said, you'll eventually want to be safe swapping out of almost every lead, just so you can check for that counter where Zard can get rid of it and Goon can close it out. Now, my Umbreon is running Last Resort, however I do recommend Psychic, since you're using it on the safe swap and a fighter will most likely be what's counter swapped into it. It gives you that chance to fight back and prevent them from over farming, such as what a Virizion or GOBattleLeague would be able to do with Last Resort. But if you're like me and don't want to use an Elite TM to get rid of a Legacy move, Last Resort will still work. And you could even replace the Umbreon with another tank like Registeel, since they both serve a similar purpose. And with that, let's get right into the battles. Alright, getting to the first battle, we lead Charizard into Obstagoon. This is a great lead for us, as Obstagoon is going to be hitting us with resisted counters while we get to hit with the neutral wing attacks, as well as threaten that ever important Blast Burn. They're going to be firing off the Night Slash from the start. Thankfully, they don't get a boost, and since my opponent is staying in, potentially they are double weak to the Charizard in the back. So we will fire off this Blast Burn to the CMP tied to their next Night Slash, and they will shield up that Blast Burn. But I can tank this next Night Slash, and since they shielded, even though I can tank it, I will shield back just because potentially I do want to save my Charizard for whatever is weak to it in the back as well. My opponent does make a nice catch of the Blast Burn onto Tapu Fini, but that's kind of what I wanted to happen, as this team is kind of weak to it. So two Blast Burns plus some wing attacks do have quite a bit of damage repercussions to that Tapu Fini. My opponent actually ends up giving up their second shield to that Blast Burn, so I will swap into my Umbreon here to tank this Moonblast and all this energy with no problem, as we do reach this Last Resort, which will bring it into another Last Resort range. And Last Resort will take out their Tapu Fini before they're able to reach another Moonblast, so they are kind of have to settle for the Surf. But we are able to survive that Surf. Umbreon, the tank it is, reaches that Last Resort, takes out the Tapu Fini, and now what we see my opponent brings in. They do bring in a Gliscor. Now this is kind of a neutral, if not maybe a little bit negative matchup for the Obstagoon, just because they are hitting for neutral with the wing attacks while we're hitting for resisted with the Night Slashes. However, we do severely outpace to our neutral Night Slashes versus their neutral Earthquakes. Otherwise, they will be hitting with not very effective and non-stab Night Slashes from their own end. And we get the boost on that Night Slash, and that's exactly what we needed, because we're able to counter down their Obstagoon, reach this next Night Slash, which will do quite a number to their Gliscor, and it's going to be erased. Are we able to hang on, reach this next Night Slash in time, which we are able to do? We hang on, reach this final charge move, take out their Gliscor for a good game. GG's to my opponent. Next battle, we lead Charizard into Shadow Steelix, and this is kind of an interesting one, as Shadow Steelix has been given access to the move Breaking Swipe with his most recent season. So if Shadow Steelix or regular Steelix throws on good timing, you will reach a Blast Burn before they go off their Breaking Swipe, in which case it's kind of a pretty safe bait of the Dragon Claw, as they are Breaking Swipe users, so they like to shield the first move. However, most of them do throw on alignment because they want to get that debuff before you reach your Blast Burn, in which case it's kind of a 50-50 call as to whether or not they shield that Blast Burn or not. In any case, my opponent swaps in their Tapu Fini to try and catch the Blast Burn, but since I am debuffed and my Charizard's energy is very useful, I will swap into my Umbreon to tank all this energy from the Fini, as well as get this Last Resort damage off. In which case, if my opponent tries to farm down, which they do, my switch time will come up, and all that energy I saved on the Charizard will be useful here, as this Dragon Claw will just about KO the Tapu to give up a shield, and I win CMP tie on the next one. This can be close. Does it KO the Tapu? They live on 1 HP, But that's perfectly fine. Charizard did his job here. It got a shield as well as wasted their energy. So now here I can bring in my Obstagoon to tank the rest of this energy, as it is just a surf, so no need for me to shield yet. A surface thrown does the damage to the Obstagoon, and then they bring back in their Shadow Steelix. Now here against Shadow Steelix, whatever Pokemon you're using is very crucial you throw on good timing, as they are a breaking swipe user, and it will make a big difference in the matchup. And again, since they are a breaking swipe user, it makes sense they showed it up my first cross chop. So now here I'm going to throw 4 more counters to their 3 Dragon Tails and fire off another cross chop, but my opponent makes a very nice catch onto their Giratina. Given that I am a 2-turn user versus a 3-turn user, it's kind of inexcusable that they made that catch on my part, but nonetheless, we will work with what we have, as fortunately that Shadow Ball is triple resisted and does absolutely nothing. So I'm going to farm it to 100 energy, and as I like to say, one catch deserves another, as we catch that Shadow Ball onto our Umbreon, reset that Breaking Swipe debuff, able to fire off Night Slash number 1, as well as Night Slash number 2. I want to make sure I'm always within range of at least 1 counter, just in case that Steelix comes back in. But in this case, I'm able to farm all the way down. They do reach last minute move, which I can give up a shield for. And from here, I throw 1 more counter than the cross chop. This will do over half the remaining HP of the Steelix. And because it does over half, and just in case I lost count of their energy, I will throw this next cross chop right away to get the job done. You know, I don't want to throw that extra counter just in case I did miscount their energy, when if I throw right away, I will get the win regardless. So that last cross chop comes through and is able to take out the Steelix. GG's to my opponent. Next battle, Charizard into Shadow Dragonite. Kind of an interesting matchup, as these Dragon Breaths do chunk, but these Dragon Claws in return from our end will do quite a number to them. The first Dragon Claw coming through does get a shield from the Shadow Dragonite, as they are looking to do quite a bit of chip damage onto our Charizard. So we're going to throw off this Dragon Claw, which I will shield up in return, and overfarm just a little bit right before the next claw and fire off this claw of my own. See what my opponent wants to do. They want to give up their final shield, so I'm going to swap right before I get to my next claw, expecting the catch of their Dragon Claw, of which we are able to get, which is very fortunate for us, as it wastes that energy before they get a superpower. My opponent does make a catch of this Foul Play onto the Escav, but that's perfect. That's exactly what I wanted. We bait out the counter user so my Obstagoon doesn't have to see it, as well as my Charizard still having enough HP left to deal with it on their end. My opponent here, look at this counter damage, just doing absolutely nothing to my Umbreon. I'm going to be able to reach another Foul Play before they're able to counter us down, so it forces them to throw their Gyro, which is perfectly fine. So now I can bring my Zard from here and either wing attack down, get to the Dragon Claw, force them to throw their energy, all 3 of which are perfectly fine by me. So in this case, they fire off the Gyro, let my Zard go, and I am going to take a double super effective damage from those counters, but I get an energy lead, I still have shield advantage, and it's a Jellicent in back. So I just need to make sure I throw in good timing. As a 2-turn user against a 3-turn user, you're going to always want to throw after 1 counter, 4 counters, or 7 counters. And since that Dragonite did bank some energy before they swapped out, I am not going to want to shield any single move against the Jellicent, as the superpower from the Dragonite is a lot more threatening. So this next surf is going to come through. I can easily survive it, no problem at all. Surf lands onto my Goon, and now here I just need to overfarm just enough where I can survive the Dragon Breath pressure, which I do right here. This Night Slash can take out the Jellicent, and I'm able to reach the final Night Slash to take out their Shadow Dragonite. GG's to my opponent, well played. Next battle, we lead Zard into Tapu Fini. And now, as we know, this is kind of a core breaker for this team, but honestly, Regular Zard doesn't really do too bad against it, as the water guns will kind of add up over time, but so do these wing attack and blast burns. I do overfarm here just in case they throw their surf right away. We will sneak an extra wing attack, but my opponent doesn't, which is perfectly fine, as I will outpace the 2 blast burns before they reach 2 surfs. So first blast burn is able to land, and now we're firing off the second blast burn. We're going to see what my opponent wants to do. and they just let their Fini go. And now I'm in a good, decent position here. So I'm going to safe swap into my Umbreon and save my Charizard for later. Generally, if they do have a Fini on the lead, Umbreon and Obstagoon do decently well in the back. So it's kind of beneficial to just stay in with your Charizard like I did. But in this case, my opponent is triple strong against the Obstagoon. And this is going to be a little tough now, as we are able to land that foul play. And Umbreon is so healthy here that it will be able to survive a superpower my opponent goes for it, which they do. So we hang on for the superpower and fire off this next foul play onto the CMP tie. And my opponent's going to let their Dragonite go and just trust into Shield Charizard. Shadow Charizard, I should say. The Dragon Claw will be just enough to take out the Umbreon. And from here, I'm kind of in a tough predicament because, again, they are triple strong to the Obstagoon. That's really my only Mon that is left. Kind of unfortunate. So I go for a little cheeky catch play there. My opponent smartly overfarms, will play to them. They don't fall to the catch. And now they're able to take out my Zard. And now here I am with my Obstagoon. My only real hope is somehow I get the boost and I'm able to counter down the Zard before they take out my Obstagoon. But they do land the Blast Burn, does put me in about Dragon Claw range, and I don't get the boost, so I resign the match. GG's to my opponent, well played. Next battle, we lead Charizard into Virizion. This is the dream lead as we're dealing double super effective damage with the wing attacks. My opponent swaps into an Shadow Alolan Muck. I don't have the best response for it since it's Poison Jab, so I'm gonna fire off a Blast Burn, get the shield advantage, and then counter swap with my Obstagoon, of which my opponent here is going to be forced to just throw off Acid Sprays and commit to the Poison Jab damage, as that Dark Pulse will be resisted. So I'm going to do the same, fire off these cross chops as soon as I get them, and I'm in a pretty good position to maintain switch here. My opponent goes for another Acid Spray. That does quite a bit for an Acid Spray, so I'm going to overfarm just enough. Looks like if my opponent shields this stuff, I will just be able to reach the next cross chop, of which they realize, so they let their Alolan Muck go and bring in their Virizion to get a 1 double kick advantage. But again, I do have a shield advantage here, so I'm in a pretty decent spot as they swap in a Skuntank. So just like with that last counter swap against the Alolan Muck, I'm going to fire off a Blast Burn and then counter swap into my own Umbreon. And to make matters worse for my opponent, we make the crunch catch and they resign the match. GG's to my opponent. Next battle, we lead Charizard into Shadow Machamp. This is fantastic lead for us, but in this situation, we need to absolutely make sure that we maintain alignment, as my backline does not want to see that at all. So we're going to stay in, throw a Blast Burn, get shield advantage or massive damage, and then counter swap into my Obstagoon. Greedent, given access to Mudshot this season, is so extremely spammy. It's so good. And the Great League, that adds up a lot. And in the Ultra League, with that bulk and that spam, it's absolutely insane. It's crazy. But we do have access to these super effective counters and cross chops where we will be able to maintain advantage, switch advantage, especially given they gave up a shield to that Blast Burn. So another Body Slam's able to land, and my opponent's going to take advantage of that switch clock. And they will fire off a cross shot from my Obstagoon, just barely not able to save it for later. But this is perfectly fine. I can bring in my Charizard here. And counting correctly, this is only a cross chop, so I don't need to respect that Rock Slide. Now I can overfarm, throw this Dragon Claw right before they reach their next cross chop, and take out that Shadow Machamp, which is fantastic. So now my Umbreon doesn't have to see it. And we get to see what my opponent has, as it's a Tapu Fini. And now this is going to be a little bit of an interesting end game, as I do have 2 shields versus 1 shields, but they do have the type advantage. So that Blast Burn lands, and that's absolutely huge. That damage is exactly what I needed. And it kind of works in your favor, throwing those Blast Burns against a Tapu Fini, because your opposing trainer goes, oh, it's a resisted move. Right, I'm gonna probably want to save my shield for a move that's neutral or something that will hit harder. But really, that Blast Burn kind of hits the hardest against the Tapu Fini against anything else on your team. And Even though it's resisted, it still does quite a bit of respectable damage. And now because of that, my Umbreon here is just going to be able to close out the game. As now I can fire off these last resorts, and plus I still have a shield. So I'm in a pretty decent position. And here I do decide to play it a little risky. I call this Surf Bait, of which ends up being a fantastic call by me. And now if the game wasn't over before, it most definitely is now. As that first last resort lands, and now here I can throw that next last resort to take out the Tapu Fini for a good game. GG's to my opponent. Next battle, we lead Charizard into Registeel. And this is kind of, you know, a neutral matchup, as we do hit for super effective the Blast Burns. I can hit super effective for the Zap Cannons to get the debuff. You know, it's kind of a little bit bait dependent, but since I am a non-Shadow Charizard, most Registeels kind of tend to no-shield the first move, considering they can land a Blast Burn anyways. And that tends to be pretty beneficial here, as it does quite a bit of damage. Now here they do land a Zap Cannon and get the debuff, but you know, regardless whether they get the Zap Cannon debuff or not, I am going to have to throw a second Blast Burn, which I do to take out their Registeel. They bring in a Shadow Charizard. Instead of throwing that Dragon Claw, I'm going to swap into my Umbreon. Umbreon, look how well it tanks that Shadow Blast Burn. That's a Shadow Blast Burn. It's absolutely crazy how much damage Umbreon can take. But again, I do swap into my Umbreon there, as my own Charizard is debuffed, and I want to save that energy for when it is not debuffed. So now I'm going to fire this Foul Play right before they reach your next Blast Burn, and I'm just going to let this go. Umbreon is a damage sponge in this situation, able to reset that attack drop from my Zard, as well as tank all that energy from my opponent. So I'm going to bring in my Charizard, over farm by one more wing attack before they reach your next move, and take out their Charizard, unless they decide to give up their last shield, which they do. That's perfectly fine, because now I can shield up myself, take out their Charizard, which I'm just barely able to get the wing attack down in time, and up all this energy, I'm in a fantastic spot. Even if they baited with a Dragon Claw, and I had to throw a Dragon Claw myself before they reach another move, and not be able to farm down, I'm doing pretty decent, as you see how the Blast Burn brings them almost to half, but I would then be able to swap into my Obstagoon, who can tank a Moonblast, and get off at least 2 Night Slashes, and close the game itself, or if not, my Zard afterwards would be able to. So either way, well played by my opponent, but that's a good game. GG's. Next battle, we lead Zard into Mandibuzz. So again, another neutral matchup here, of which I will want to swap out of eventually. But first, I'm going to throw these Blast Burns to get a little bit of chip damage, since Mandibuzz is extremely tanky. They go for a Foul Play right off the bat, which is fine. So I'm going to load up, throw one more wing attack, and then the Blast Burn for good timing, and then farm up extra, try and catch onto my Umbreon. Since they threw an alignment first time, I was kind of hoping they'd throw an alignment the second time, but of course they do over farm. And you know what? They end up throwing that energy anyways, which is fantastic, because that Aerial Ace does absolutely nothing. And they bring in a Shadows, and they bring in a regular Steelix, excuse me, which, you know, isn't as good as seeing it onto my Obstagoon, but you'll see here. Umbreon's bulk is absolutely crazy. That's a regular Steelix, a Breaking Swipe user, constantly lowering my attack, right? And you'll see just how insane that is even though my attack's being lowered, I'm still able to keep pace with this Steelix like nobody's issue. It's absolutely insane. As you'll see, those Dragon Tails do nothing to the Umbreon. They land yet another Breaking Swipe, and now we're here about the same HP range, but I'm a little up on energy, so that's perfectly fine. So here I'm going to fire off that another Foul Play. They're going to fire off another Breaking Swipe, which I will be able to survive no problem at all. Look how little that does. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. I just can't overstate how much bulk and how much of a tank Umbreon is. And now here, I force them to throw another Breaking Swipe, otherwise I'd reach another Foul Play. So I go for that move, take out my Umbreon. Now from here, I can bring my Obstagoon, counter down their Steelix, see what my opponent wants to bring in, and they bring back in the Mandibuzz. So potentially, their third Pokemon does not want to see the Obstagoon as well. So again, as always, throwing good timing, absolutely crucial to become a better trainer, better battler in all different aspects. Sometimes games come down to a single turn, and throwing on good timing makes that difference. They go for an aerial ace, and I'm going to throw after 4 counters. Again, 2 turn user versus 3 turn user. You want to throw after 1, 4, or 7 iterations of fast move. My opponent gives up a shield, which clues me in that they're weak in the back. So I am going to want to give up a shield of my own just to preserve Obstagoon's HP as I counter down the Mandibuzz. And it turns out that they are weak in the back as my opponent concedes the match. GG's. Next battle, we Charizard into Shadow Alolan Sandslash. Now this is a pretty decent matchup as Blast Burns absolutely obliterate the A-Slash. However, they do outpace us to this Ice Punch, I should say, which is perfectly fine. So now here, I'm just going to overfarm. I would play to the CMP tie to fire off that Blast Burn to their Ice Punch as we do win CMP, but my opponent catches the Blast Burn on Tapu, as which I showed you guys before is exactly what I want to happen if they have a Tapu, because Blast Burn is the hardest hitting move here. So I land both Blast Burns, and now the Tapu's already in the red, which is fantastic, because now I will have no problem getting rid of the Tapu. Umbreon won't have to see it anymore. Obstagoon won't have to see it. That's fantastic. Exactly what I wanted. My opponent makes a nice bait of the Surf onto the Moonblast there. And here, I overfarm a little bit. I play to Moonblast count, so my opponent smartly throws a Surf instead. But what that allows me to do is tank that energy, throw a Foul Play, and then get some extra. And they have a Galarian Weezing in the back. So, unfortunately, Obstagoon kind of has nowhere to go, but we're going to see what I can do. Make sure to throw on good timing. As a 3-turn user versus 2-turn user, it's after 1, 3, or 5 iterations of your fast move. My opponent's not running Play Rough. They're running Brutal Swing and Overheat. Now they're going to save swap into their Alolan Sandslash. And since I know that health on my Obstagoon isn't ideal, it's rather energy, I'm just going to tank all this, save my shield for my Charizard or my Umbreon, and counter all the way down where I now have these moves to throw off against the Galarian Weezing. First Night Slash comes through. It gets no shielded, which makes sense just in case I get the boost, but now I am at another Night Slash that is going to force them to give up that first shield. If my opponent's countering properly, which they are, they're going to be able to take out my Obstagoon on the CMP tie. That's fine. I have no issues with that as Obstagoon can go down, and now I'm in a pretty good position to close out this match as my Charizard can just wing attack down all the way. But I do unfortunately get the 1-turn lag on the swap in there, so I don't get the wing attack through. And instead of being able to farm down all the way, what that's going to make me do is play to a catch of the Brutal Swing onto my Umbreon. And if the game wasn't over yet, it is already. As here, I reach this Foul Play, which will get their final shield. If I wanted to, I can throw the Dragon Claw on my Charizard. I could have farmed down all the way. Either way is a good option, as we are able to take that one. GG's to my opponent. Next battle, we lead Zard into another Tapu Fini lead. A little bit of redemption chance here. So we're going to stay in like before, as Charizard is kind of our best answer to the Tapu Fini, given its damage it can apply from its charged moves. So like normal, I overfarm just in case to try and play to that CMP. And now I'm going to start firing off these Blast Burns. First Blast Burn is going to get a shield, and the second one is going to land as well. So my opponent realizes that, you know, I'm probably pretty weak to the Tapu and they want to preserve some HP. But that's fine, their Tapu's in the red. Honestly, most Tapu leads are weak to the Umbreon or Goon in the back, so playing this strategy a lot of the time gives your Obstagoon a good chance to sweep. But it seems like my opponent also has a Charizard in the back, so hopefully Goon has some play against the third Mon. Just kind of be a little bit unfortunate if it has nowhere to go against the 3 Tapu leads, considering a lot of the time it has quite a bit of play against Tapu back lines. And this is a non-Shadow Charizard, so I can take this Blast Burn no problem. And even if it was Shadow, I'd be able to take it no problem. But we do reach this next Foul Play. See what my opponent does. they decide to give up their final shield. And now here I'm thinking about swapping to my Charizard to try and catch, but of course my opponent throws in good timing. My Umbreon, I'm not able to catch their move. And from here, I'm just essentially banking on Obstagoon being able to close out the match. But again, it's a Gliscor in the back. Again, the Tapu, Charizard, Gliscor just triple strong against my own Obstagoon, really giving it nowhere to go. And just kind of a very tough situation overall. So here I'm kind of playing it out. I still do have a win con, maybe get a boost. Able to catch a move onto my own Charizard as a sack swap. Who knows? We'll see what can happen. No Night Slash boost yet, as my opponent's able to overfarm. Is this the Earthquake? It is, unfortunately. Brings my Obstagoon very low. And from here, this game's just about over. As now I can bring my Charizard. They bring in their own Zard. Able to throw a Dragon Claw to take out mine. And able to wing attack down my Obstagoon. GG's my opponent, well played. Like I said earlier, this team is centered around a hard hitter and 2 tanks, of which put in a lot of work in their own right. And again, I do recommend Psychic on the Umbreon to deal with the fighters when you safe swap it in, as well as Registeel being another potential option, but nonetheless, this is a very strong team. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate you. If you enjoyed it, please drop a like, subscribe, and comment down below. I'd love to hear what you have to say, and with that, I'll catch you in the next one.